her eyes are the last thing you ever see. Stories of the Gorgon queen stretch back 3,000 summers. A hero cut off her head, and from that death a horse was born. But she was not always a monster. Once, long ago, she was beautiful and a priestess. Then a god broke the rules, and the curse fell on the wrong head. Her hair turned to vipers, and her stare turned men to stone. She was hunted across a Bronze Age sea to a witch island. A king's folly sent a young hero to bring back her head. With borrowed sandals, a mirrored shield, and help from the gods, that hero walked into a cave of whispering stone and walked out alive. When he raised the severed head, kingdoms fell. Have you heard why her raven-haired sisters wept into the sand? The Gorgons were three sisters in old Greek legend, born of sea gods, daughters of deep, unreachable foam. Medusa was the only mortal. Steno and Uriel lived forever, immortal and terrible to behold. That single mortal difference sits at the heart of her myth, shaping every choice the gods make later. Long before the snakes, Medusa served Athena in a sacred grove on the rocky coast, a place of olive shade. She kept the temple, helped the rituals, and wore white robes at dawn when the breeze smelled of pine. Poseidon, the earthquake god of all the rolling seas, watched her honored work and grew hungry. He came for her on sacred ground, breaking Athena's sanctuary in an act the old poets handled with sorrow. Athena could not punish a god as mighty as her uncle, however loud the cry rose through Olympus. So she punished the mortal woman instead in a cruel twist the old world remembered for centuries. The goddess crowned the girl with hissing snakes for hair, braided tight as a wreath of vipers. She gave her a gaze that turned flesh to cold gray stone wherever she looked, and let her see only stone. She cast her out to a wild island at the edge of the world, where no friendly ship would land. Yet many retellings hide this. Medusa was already pregnant with her children when the curse fell. That is why her son sprang, fully grown and strange, from her spilled blood at the end. Let this be the whispered question of the tale. Were the ancient Greeks listening when they wrote her? They knew, too, what it means to be blamed for the deeds of the powerful and left the trail unfurled. Medusa's island lay far west, past the Pillars of Hercules, in seas the Greeks barely dared to chart. She slept in a stone-ringed cave, her immortal sisters guarding the shore in long gray hours. From her breath the driftwood turned to rock, the cliffs becoming shelves of marble dust. Many warriors tried to kill her, drawn by promises of glory whispered in palace halls. Everyone walked in brave and walked out a garden of statues, frozen mid-stride on silent sand. Until a young prince named Perseus, son of Zeus, set out to try where many had failed. What sent Perseus after Medusa was a king's cruel game, not any hunger for the Gorgon's head. His mother Danae and he lived as refugees on a foreign island, tolerated only by an old king's pity. The local king, Polydectes, wanted Danae for himself and plotted to act before the year was out. He threw a great feast and asked every guest for a gift of horses as custom demanded in those lands. Perseus, poor and proud, had nothing to offer, only a sharp tongue and a young man's pride. He blurted in front of the laughing court that he would bring back the Gorgon's head, not a horse. Polydectes smiled and called his bluff, certain the boy would die on his own words. A king's word was law in those days, so the quest became real, sealed in wine and witnessed by all. Perseus did not walk alone. Athena and Hermes, gods of wisdom, met him on the road ahead. They could not strike the Gorgon themselves, but they armed him well with divine gifts. Hermes lent him winged sandals that flew him over wind and wave, fast as a thought through surf. He gave him a pouch called a kybissus, a bag that never tore, however sharp the thing inside. Athena loaned a polished bronze shield, a mirror-bright door hammered flat by Hephaestus himself. Perseus won a helm of darkness that hid him like smoke in bright daylight. From a divine cousin, a sickle of adamantine, harder than mortal steel the smiths could make. Before he could find the Gorgon, he had to find the Graii, 3 gray-haired witches of the twilight. The gray shared one yellow eye and passed it from hand to hand like a coin at a stall. Perseus crept up while the eye was handed across and stole it cold from the middle witch. The gray begged and cawed, but he would not give the eye back until they sang him directions. They sang directions to the Gorgon Isles and to the cold nymphs of the far north. From them, he received a cap of invisibility and a magic sack to carry his trophy home unseen. Here the legend turns dark for a moment, and you will see the pattern repeat itself again. Perseus flew west on the borrowed sandals until he found a silent shore of white sand and statues. He found the sleeping Gorgons on a beach, scattered with fragments of 100 brave fools. Steno and Euryale dozed among driftwood that had once been ships, frozen mid-cry in their last step. Medusa alone had her snakes awake, drifting like dark seaweed around her stone-cold cheeks. If Perseus had looked directly, his story ended there, a fresh piece of marble cooling on sand. So Perseus turned his back, used Athena's bright shield as a mirror, watching her reflection only. He moved with the patience of hunters across the brittle stones of that cave. He walked on quiet feet, careful to step only on soft sand so no click would wake them. He swung the adamantine blade in one sweeping arc, the motion finished in a single breath. The head came free, neck clean, no brutal scene to describe, only the hiss of falling snakes. He dropped the kill into the magic sack before the blood could touch the ground, where things grew. Then he pulled the helm of darkness down, and vanished like smoke into night, as sisters stirred. Her sisters woke, sniffed the air, and screamed loud enough to shake cliff walls and the horizon. But Perseus was a ghost in flight, and they could not pin him down along the western sea. Here's the part the poets love most, the strange blooming at the end of every ordeal. Medusa's blood, spilling on that witch island's dark sand, did something strange and terrible indeed. From that blood rose Pegasus, the winged white horse that carries storms across the high sky. From that same pool rose Christor, a giant with a golden sword, father of a monster yet unborn. Notice how the legend gives Medusa one last gift after her death, a mother of strange children. She had been cursed for another's act. In death, the poets still let her be fruitful in her way. Were the old myth-makers telling us something about how power shifts blame? How the dead outlive the powerful? Perseus still had a long road home. The gods had not finished with him, as gods so seldom are. On the way back, he flew over the great Titan Atlas, who held up the western sky. Atlas refused him water at a cold spring and tried to turn him away with rough words. So Perseus showed him the Gorgon's face, polite but final. Atlas became stone where he stood. That, the old story says, is how the Atlas Range became a frozen giant under the African sky. Years later, he passed Ethiopia, ruled by Cepheus and his proud, vain queen Cassiopeia. He saw a young woman chained to a rock by the sea, weeping into the surf alone in her fear. Her name was Andromeda, princess of Ethiopia, sacrificed by her parents to a great sea monster. Her mother had bragged her daughter was more beautiful than the sea nymphs the gods loved. To appease the ocean, the king had bound his child as bait, hoping the gods would relent. Perseus, still warm from triumph, asked only that he marry her if she lived, and he won. He flew above the breaking waves and held the Gorgon's head high above foam and dawn light. The great sea beast saw those eyes and froze solid where it swam, a ridge of stone in the surf. The lovers sailed home together. The court of the cruel Polydectes was waiting at the harbor. Back home, Polydectes had grown bold and cornered Danae, demanding her hand by force and threat. He moved to force her hand, certain the boastful youth would never return from the western world. Perseus stormed the great hall, where wine cups clinked as men had forgotten their fear. He announced who he was and asked the king to honor the original wager sworn in public wine. Polydectes laughed and refused, and his guards reached for spears as if the matter were settled. Perseus drew the head and held it up like a lantern, easy as lifting a cup of wine. The king, the guards, every one of them turned to cold stone, mid-word, mid-thought. Only those who had been looking away survived, and an ash-colored peace fell over the island. In the end, Perseus returned the borrowed gifts to the gods one by one, with thanks. He gave the helm to the lords of the underworld, the sandals to Hermes, the swift one. The sickle and the magic bag went home, with the Gorgon's head still safely inside. But the head of Medusa he laid on Athena's shield, where it gleamed for centuries to come. Athena placed it on her aegis to terrify her enemies in every war to follow. And so the cursed woman, blamed for another's crime, became the guardian of war, honored forever. If you love these legends, there is a whole playlist waiting by the fire, one quest on another. Next time, we will meet the hero who tried to fetch the golden apples of the Hesperides. Drop a comment below telling me which cursed figure you want next in the long, warm dark. I will see you on the next legend when the stars are out and the meadow mists lie low.